Recording in progress.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go once again. The one and only Chronic Chris from AsgardRadio.com, hanging out with my good friend, partner in crime, Asgard's fearless leader, Slider. And today we are talking with a legend. Straight up, this guy has worked with everyone. He has been everywhere. Currently hiding out. Looks like he's in the back room of a strip club in Las Vegas. Phil, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you very much. And yes, indeed, I've tried to model my living accommodations just like a strip club so that I feel right at home.
Right on. And now you literally have worked with everyone. How did you get started?
Oh my gosh, me right at the beginning?
Yeah.
Uh, well, I started playing instruments when I was very, very young, and it was something
Oh,
I
we
did my
lost.
whole life. What? Is that? Oh,
Say what,
sorry,
Jim?
thanks. There was a weird sound.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah, can you hear us? Oh, okay. Yeah, it was. I've been playing instruments my whole life, and I was actually in the middle of planning on going to medical school, believe it or not. And then it just got to a point where one day I just had to be honest with myself and say what was I most passionate about, and what I was most passionate about was music. So I said, okay, going to make a conscious effort to make this my life. And in London, growing up in London, it was a very small musical community. Everybody knew each other. It was really tight, and so it was really a question of trying to get into that community. And I did that by going to lots and lots of auditions and trying to play with as many people as possible. I'd missed the boat on um, the bands that were formed at my school. There was a lot of bands that came out of the school I went to, and one of the bands that was in my year was Madness, for example. Mark Bedford and I were in class together, so they had all sort of done that, and I had gone on to advanced education. By the time I had gone into music, it was like those opportunities to find that band that you grew up with had sort of sailed. So I was going to auditions, and I was trying to you know find a band that I'd like to play with, and that got to know me, and eventually people started to get to know who I was. Started to work with various different bands, and it all sort of went from there. It was like little tiny footsteps and stepping stones uh, to to a point where um, I suppose well actually I was actually I was in a band called Wildlife, and we were signed. It was Simon Kirk's solo band. Simon was in it, and we were signed to Swan Song Records. And when that band folded, um, I got a call from Jimmy Page asking if I wanted to put a band together. And I was very, very young, and it wasn't so much put a band together. I think it was more like he was looking to sort of get back into playing, and with a view to eventually forming a band. And so for quite some time, Chris Slade, myself, and him got together, and every day we would jam and just have a good time, just play songs. And during that time, I went to an audition for Ozzy, and I got the audition, the gig with Ozzy. And then I had that dilemma. I didn't know if I should stay with Jimmy or go and play with Ozzy. I was a huge Jimmy Page fan, so it was a very difficult decision. I actually talked to Jimmy about it and said,
Yeah.
not sure what to do. And he said to me, look, we're going to do this, but we're probably not going to do anything for another year and a half or so. So it's kind of your call, whatever you want to do. You want to go and do that straight away. We'd love to have you. Then that's great. And if you want to stay here, we'd love to have you here. We stayed friends, but the rest is history. I joined Ozzy and moved on from there.
So,
Yeah, I actually had the privilege of seeing you in 1986.
Oh, with Ozzy, the Ultimate Sin.
Yes,
yeah,
at
Yeah.
UIC Pavilion in Chicago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm old. I'm old.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that gig I think might have been cut short a little bit, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah, I
Um,
think
I
someone
don't
did.
remember who got sick or
Jake.
yeah.
Jake had some, I think he got some back injury or something like that, and had to, he could only perform, I don't know how much it was. It was about half the show. It was definitely
Yeah.
cut short.
It was
And
cut really short, and everybody, we were walking out, and everybody was bitching and complaining. And I'm like, you still saw Ozzy? Are you kidding? What is? you know, I was like, people get hurt. You know, we were kids. I was a teenager back then, and you know, it was my senior year of high school, and
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, it was still a good show, but yeah, he did have issues. He had issues with his back, and he couldn't. It was like I think you guys did like a 40-minute set, 45-minute, and then it was over.
Yeah, it was normally about an hour and a half or so, right? An hour and
Right.
20. Yeah.
So, but no, I just wanted to throw that out there. That I did have the privilege of seeing you back in, like I said, '86 with Ozzy, and it was just I had thought it was a fantastic show, even though it was cut short. I just because I was a big Ozzy fan to be growing up.
Well, Jim, I feel really bad now. Like, if you know what songs they were, I'll come out and I'll play you those songs right now. How about I come to your place? I'll play those songs and we can call it quits, right?
Okay, we can do that. Absolutely.
So you got your official start in the music industry because Jimmy Page called you.
Well, I suppose it would have been. I mean, I was playing with a bunch of bands that you will never have heard of because unfortunately they never really did anything before it got to that point. But that was the first big thing that I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I suppose the first big thing was working with Simon because Simon Kirk was previously was of course he was a drummer in Bad Company, but prior to that he was a drummer in Free, and Free was a band that was a really big influence on. Absolutely, Andy Fraser, who the most understated member of that band was, I think, when he was 15 years old, 16 years old, wrote most of the songs, played bass in there, was an incredible bass player.
I gotta say, Freeze All Right Now, that is one of my favorite bass lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it for some reason.
Right. And there's so many other Free songs that have incredibly awesome bass lines. I just loved his way of playing. I loved how much space he put into his parts. And that was something that I learned very, very young. It was right there with the McCartneys and, you know, all of that stuff.
To me, it's music that sounds like they're having fun making it.
Yeah.
Like Luke Lukather, I seen you at work with him, and I actually the other day I told Dave I just the other day watched the Yacht Rock documentary, and totally not what I thought it was gonna be, but it was pretty awesome about Toto and the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan, and that was just those guys.
I mean, those guys. You know, I loved that kind of music because that was another type of music I loved. I loved all these different types of music, but that was one. Back then, it was kind of called like jazz fusion or something.
Yeah,
remember?
Yeah, that's what they said in the documentary. It's like a rock music with a jazz chord switch.
Right. So I was listening to a lot of that stuff back then, and that was a big influence on me, certainly as a writer as well. I mean, I was using those chords which were not typical in rock music, or those type of minor seventh chordings really played on piano. I mean, Al Jarreau was somebody I listened to a lot, and I got a lot of inspiration for that. A lot of Shot in the Dark is actually those same chords, and so it's. But you know, within that whole era of Christopher Cross and all of those, the same people. It was all the Toto guys that were playing on all that stuff.
Yeah, they were on. They were on
Big Raiden and all of them. So you know, when I got to work with Steve years later, I mean, that was a really a great honor, a great privilege to work with him for that reason.
One thing I didn't know, I learned from that documentary, was Toto was the studio band for Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Yep. Oh, and many others too.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, they were pretty much Boz Scaggs' band. I think that's what was going on before they got formed.
And they hung out with Steve. Or no, that was they were talking about Stevie Nicks and people that hung out with her. I think it was Boz Scaggs. Yeah. I can't remember now. But
it was a scene, you know, and these guys were amazing. I mean, when I played with Luke, I can't remember. Don't quote me on this, but I think he told me he'd been on 400 or even 500 albums, which is just daunting to me. I can't, you know. I think
that's crazy.
That might make somebody the most recorded musician, wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe. Well, I know the most. What is it called? The most. What's it called? When you take a little piece of somebody else's music, put it in your own.
Plagiarized?
Huh?
Plagiarized.
Yeah,
sampled.
Sampled?
yeah, the most plagiarized or taken music is from the old uh, doctor that used to play on NCIS.
Don McCallum.
Yes, Don McCallum. He's the most they took from his album from way back when. That just that little part. It's the most done redone bit.
I don't know what it is, but Chris is like a wealth of knowledge over here. He's like pulling these.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was
That's why he's
sampled.
my station manager.
Everybody has sampled it. Dr. Dre sampled it. It's Don McCallum. I'm trying to remember the name of the damn song.
Yeah.
He was like 20 years old, 22 years old, something like that when he did it before he even started acting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Back in the 60s.
Yeah. But he's from is he from Scotland, I think?
Yes.
Oh,
Originally.
well, hey, McCallum.
Yeah. And there's a Scots like that.
The only McCallums I've known came in a bottle. But
Yeah,
right.
Scotch. Yeah, exactly. So now, now that you have done everything, you have this vast array of knowledge of music, and somebody said it. I think it was Prophets of Addiction who said it. Everybody's given the same chords. It's just what you do with them. I started Asgard 15 years ago to help the little bands, coming up and to give them. So now you're with Prophets of Addiction, and you produced one of their songs, and Last in Line. You got.
yeah, I mean, I'm not in Prophets of Addiction. I just produced.
No, you produced their song.
Yes. Yeah. But I am in Last in Line, and I produced the album for Prophets, and I actually played on it as well. Which, Les is a bass player, and he said to me, sort of sheepishly, he goes, "Hey, do you want to play bass on it?" And I went, "You want me to?" And he goes, "That'd be great." I said, "Sure, okay." I loved it. So it's kind of cool. I got to play both sides of the recording studio glass, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was on this side and I was on that side. But it was a lot of fun, yeah. And then of course,
is that what you do now? Do you go and are you trying to help other bands now and maybe giving them some advice on some some things that you have? I mean, obviously you have enough knowledge to help people with the new band. So is that what you're trying to do now, or are you just?
No, I just try to help them spend as much money as they possibly can. Is what I do.
Which for some of these musicians ain't much.
No.
Yeah.
No, but I'm joking. I mean, we really did this on a shoestring budget. I mean, it was really cool. And I like doing stuff like that. I mean, that's the way it is now. Those days of, I mean, we were sitting there in the middle of this record company discussions. It was like they were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We got so much money to make the record, and then there's a studio going, great, we're going to charge you $2,000 a day plus you get a ceremonial fruit basket every morning. And it was like, these numbers were daunting because we didn't have that kind of money, and we're just sitting there going, fuck. And then at the end of the day, all of a sudden, everyone turns around and says, well, you owe so much money. And he said, well, we didn't spend it. What did we spend it on? Well, okay, you had all those meals that came in, and you had this and that and the other, and you had, but there was all these hangers-on. I didn't know who they were. People coming down, they're coming down for dinner and taking us out for dinner. And it's like, well, there you go. It's a list.
Oh my God.
So somehow or other, this old world paradigm didn't really work. There you are, you're a band. You've worked your butt off to make an album. Apparently, you've been given a budget of $400,000. You've made the record. You've toured around the world. It's sold 2 million copies. You come home and find out you're in debt.
Yeah.
How did that happen? And that's really what was wrong with the music business. That's why it eventually it died a death, I think. I'll give you a couple of little examples. Way back when, record labels had divisions where they had an A&R department, they had a photographic and art department, they had a marketing department, they had a production department, they had a this department, that department, everything else. And gradually they said, oh, we don't really want to do that. So bands would hire concrete marketing. Oh, we don't want to do that. We'd hire our own publicist. Don't want to do that. You'd hire. At the end of the day, what did they do? They did two things. They paid for the record, and they distributed the record. Well, when everybody got into Pro Tools and into home studios, there was no real need to pay for the record anymore. So they were stuck with distribution. Then comes digital distribution. Well, guess what? They did themselves out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And digital distribution isn't paying for shit. These bands don't make anything on digital.
Yes,
Yeah,
so all of you people going through your Spotify recap right now, just know those bands didn't make shit for you listening on Spotify. Go buy a physical album.
Oh, buy an album. You know, the thing is, you're right, Chris, because I think if you get about 2 billion plays, you can get a Starbucks coffee.
Yeah. Yes. That's about it.
It's really funny if you look at it. It's like 0.000000000001.
Hell, I don't even think you can get a Starbucks coffee with how much that cost.
Right.
You know what? It really has turned out. I mean, growing up in the 70s and 80s, buying albums was just fantastic. And watching bands, I mean, my first album was Kiss, Rock and Roll Over. And and then, I got into Ozzy and Motley Crue and, watching, and then Black Sabbath because I liked Ozzy so much. And then, you read about where Motley Crue started and how they grew. And all these other bands that were so small and they grew, Kiss is one, obviously everybody in the world knows who Kiss is.
Yeah.
Even, midway through the 80s, they were the biggest band ever. And now you can't get that because you don't get, like you said, the distribution of albums. They have to sell them themselves. They don't get that, that big record signing to where they can have the money to go tour. But like you said, they can go on tour, but now you're in debt.
Yeah. Well, we all grew up from. Maybe we should change the name of the band to Motley Crue.
Well, yeah,
But,
like Jim was saying, and I'm a firm believer to go out and support your local band because that's where everybody started, as a simple local band.
absolutely, Chris, and I very much appreciate you saying that. And but there are some things that have changed in the business. We used to I always say we used to give people a free lighter, free headband, free baseball cap, and a cheap ticket. Come to the show, and then please go out and buy the album. And now the music has become a lost leader. Now we give away the music and say, come to the show, buy an expensive ticket, buy a lighter, buy a headband, buy a baseball cap. So we're in the merchandise business now. That's where we get the music from. That's where it gets monetized now. In some respects, that may be a purer way of doing things because the live concert event cannot be bootlegged. It can't be copied.
Exactly.
You have to go to a concert. So I kind of think it's brought the focus back to the live show, which maybe is a good thing. And as I said, as we were saying before, we never really participated in the sales of the records anyway. We just, we just basically, the money that was made for them went to pay for making the record, which we then had to sell to make the money to pay for it, if that makes sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, actually.
Well,
It's a little bit like if you bought a house, right? You went out and buy a house, you got a mortgage, and then you paid off the mortgage after 30 years. They turn around to you and they say, great, thank you very much. Nice doing business with you. Here's the title deed of your house. It's yours. In the record business, you went out, you got an advance, you paid for the record, you did everything. You paid it all back, and they said, thanks very much. Great doing business with you. But guess what? We still own the album. It just didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it don't make sense. But that is the best, that is probably the most accurate way to describe what it is today from back then. Like you said, we gave away everything, you came to the show. Now it's you come to the show and you have to buy everything. That's probably, like you said, that's the monetization of how they make money. And it's really, when I get free tickets, I get free tickets to go and do interviews and go to concerts and do reviews and stuff, which is fine, but I always buy something. Always buy something. I
was going to say that the cheaper the ticket, the more I have to spend at the merch tables. And that's why a lot of the times I prefer your smaller venues, $15, $20, $25 at the most to get in the door. And then I didn't pay $100 to get in, so now I got 80 extra bucks to spend at the merch table.
But it's a zero-sum game, isn't it, Chris? Because what happens is this. If you run a nightclub and then you have a valet parking guy that charges you $25 to park your car, Well, guess what? You're not going to spend it at the bar, are you? You only have a certain amount of money to spend, and sometimes these places can, they end up reaming all the money from the audience that comes in, and then when you do get to pay for something that goes to the band, it's compromised. I agree with you. I like the small venues as well. I think it's a greater experience. I like going to see bands in smaller venues. Always do.
Yeah.
And one of the things, though, I will say, I mean, it's not just all about money. We do this because we love it. But one of the great things that we do in the small venues is people are still buying collector's items. They're still buying vinyl, and they're still buying CDs that we sign, for example. So they're much more collectible because we've got signatures on them and stuff, and we'll sign them specifically for people. That part of it is really a big thing as well, and that's right. The best way that we can interact with our audiences, and it has no interference from live venues or from record labels or from anything else.
Right. Well, and I know for a fact that you love this and you enjoy this. I saw your little promo for the new Prophets of Addiction, and you were excited that we got this album coming out. Check it out. Yeah. You were excited about it. Whereas you see some bands, we got a new album, whatever. So being from an older generation, and now you're working with a younger group of guys on Prophets of Addiction, how is that balancing out?
Well, there's not that much of an age difference between me and Les, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, no, there's not. You're right. There isn't.
But I, in the spirit of the question, it's definitely a much more earthy, what's the word I'm trying to use? Like club living kind of type of music, and it's definitely rough around the edges. It's more street like. I mean, I really enjoy that stuff. I love working with things that are very diverse and different. But there's a big part of me that loved that kind of music as well. I grew up in a part of London called Maida Vale, which is in Paddington, which is if you took Abbey Road and you went down one street, that's kind of Maida Vale. And so it's very close to that whole area of St. John's Wood and Maida Vale, whatever. Okay, Maida Vale was very famous because in the late 70s, that's where all the punk bands started, the original ones, like The Clash and Generation X and the Kilburn and the High Roads. And
I'm pretty sure Abbey Road Studios is one of the most famous recording studios in the world.
Well, those punk bands weren't working at Abbey Road. They were working in like shithole clubs and banging around. I mean, that was like a street kind of music, and I was right in the middle of it. And maybe later on they might have worked there. I mean, it was Abbey Road was kind of the that was a place where only a few select incredible bands managed to work. But I think my point is that that's why I relate to that music is because of this kind of street element to it. I used to go and see bands at the Marquee and go and see bands at the Moonlight and all these different places around London. I mean, I went to see the Sex Pistols at the London Polytechnic when they were a fairly new band. I went to see the Police when there was 4 people in the Police. There was not 3 of them, there was 4 of them. And all of these bands, there was this buzz that was going on. And in a way, it was difficult because I was a classic rock guy as well. So I sort of was leading a double life. I was sort of still very true to my classic rock influences, but I loved the earthiness and the energy. And it was the music, I suppose, when you're 17 or 18 years old, it's the music of your generation.
Right.
It's hard to avoid. That was our excitement. That was like, this is our music, okay?
Yes.
Whether you like it or not. There was an attitude.
Yeah, in the 70s and 80s, the punk was, I mean, I was in Germany in the late 80s and early 90s. I was stationed there in the Army. And the punk scene was still like the 70s over there. It was, they weren't going for the big record labels. They were just, like you said, there was a street element to it. They were offset to everything else. I would go, we met a bunch of German locals who were really into the punk scene, and we go to concerts with them, and it was fantastic because everybody just accepted everybody, but they didn't want all that, the big record labels. They didn't want all that, all that trash. And I remember when Green Day finally got their first album and signed, and they said they were sellouts. They weren't really a punk band anymore. But I mean, you got to make money. If you're going to do this, you got to make money. But back then, yes, I mean, there's so many punk bands that never went for that big time name. And then there was some. You got the Dead Kennedys for example, and Butthole Surfers. So I mean, we did have quite a few, but yeah, Germany was fantastic with the punk scene.
But most people have never heard of one of my favorites, the Buzzcocks.
The Buzzcocks, of course. They're
brilliant. Buzzcocks.
Yeah, of course.
Fast riffs, 2-minute songs. You can fit 20 of them in an hour.
That's right. That's right. That was a lot of it. It was just high energy. I mean, it just never let up, and that was one of the things that was cool about it. I'll tell you a funny story. That I was trying to get into a band when I was really young. I was trying to get into these bands, and I met John Tao, who was a drummer, and he was a drummer in Generation X originally, and then he was trying to get me into some of these bands. We worked together on a couple of projects, and he said, he liked the way I played, and he said, I'm going to try to get you into these bands. But I was about 4 years too young, and it just didn't work out. He went off and he played with Adam and the Ants, and then he went off and played with who else did he play with? Gosh, I can't remember. Anyway, he played with a whole bunch of punk bands afterwards, and no one could really understand when I left Ozzy and went to work with Billy Idol, and that was the reason. That was the thing, because that was kind of a bucket list thing, that was why, because people said, well, hang on a second, you're playing with Ozzy, what, Billy Idol? I mean, that's back in the 80s, that was like really radically different.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's kind of why. I mean, that was one of the things that sounded like a really good idea to me at the time.
I want to ask you this. I'd like to know more about what you do today, but it's still, your resume is just astounding. And when, you have played with so many and have done so much with, what was that when you first got into music and you tried and tried and tried, and then all of a sudden you got this big break?
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like? I mean, because now you are, like I said, your resume, with Ozzy and Billy Idol, and how did you keep that going and still kind of be true to who you were? I mean, there's a lot of bands out there that are trying to up and come, and do things, but they're not true to themselves. They try to do a little bit more than what they really are capable of. How did you keep yourself contained and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do? And excuse me, you went from Ozzy to Billy, and you're like, all right, how do I keep true to myself and do what, like you said, a bucket list? Because I mean, you did so much, in your lifetime.
Well, I don't know that I really had a plan to do that, or I to be honest with you, I wasn't always very secure about what I did. I didn't know that if I was any good or not. It's hard to be. It's you have to be honest with yourself and say, I'd see people and playing and think, wow, I thought I was good, and this person's way better than I'll ever be, and that's part of the desire to improve what it is that you do. I've always, I mean, when I started auditioning, I was auditioning so much that it was almost like I was auditioning the band rather than them auditioning me, because I got to the point where I could then, I wasn't like, okay, thanks a lot, thanks for coming down. They would say, well, we'd like to work with you again. And then I would say, well, let me think about this, because I didn't know if that's what I wanted to do. And I had to sort of be really selective about what it was. I didn't want to just do something for the sake of doing it. I wanted to do something that I felt I could really add to, I could really contribute to. So, and then, looking back now, I mean, I'm a much better musician than I was back then, but hopefully that doesn't end. I wake up every morning realizing there's something I can't do, and that I want to be able to do, and I want to be able to be a better player. And I said one time that it's like the way I keep motivated is I try to learn something good every night, and I feel really good about learning that, going to bed and going, wow, I learned something very, very different. And then the next morning I wake up depressed because I don't know enough about what I learned the night before. So you have to keep yourself always like, raising the bar, but slightly, little bit by little bit. I always believe in setting attainable goals. You can't just hope to go out there and to use an analogy, I want to win the World Series. That's too difficult. You've got to go out there and say, well, I just want to make sure that I can swing this bat as best as I possibly can. You've got a damn good chance of being able to do that. And if you do that enough times, then maybe the World Series will take care of itself. So it's just little steps, little attainable steps. That's what I tell younger people.
Little goals to get to the big goal.
Absolutely. And also, if you do attainable goals, then once you've attained it, once you've done it, it makes you feel good. It's not like I set a goal that there's no way I could do that, and now I feel depressed because I don't think I'm any good at this. If you do little things and say, well, I managed to do that, how about I do a little bigger thing tomorrow? How about I do something else tomorrow? That's a really, really great way to stay motivated, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said before, when I started Asgard, it was for Chicago, because I live in Northwest Indiana, and so I would go to concerts in Chicago, and I saw all these opening bands. I mean, back in the day, it was like my first concert was Autograph opened up for Motley Crue.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that was back in 1984. So yeah. I mean, but it was always just an opener and the headliner. That's all it was back then. Now it's like
Steve Lynch was a great guitar player, wasn't he?
What's that?
Steve Lynch was a great guitar player.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Now you get two locals, an opener, and a headliner.
Yeah, you get direct support, headliner, and then two locals. And I'm like, these bands, some of these bands are really good that are locals. So my stepbrother is a vice president at J.P. Morgan Chase in Chicago. I called him up. I'm like, I got an idea, man. I think we have something here. Let's help these bands. And it started with Chicago, and then I got my first international band all the way from Australia. And I'm thinking, all right, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here because I never thought like this. So I got, I went back to school to learn more about it. And anyway, but now we're worldwide and we get to help these bands. And I just think it's a fantastic thing that we're doing is that, Chris has the same idea. Our other girl, our morning girl, Stacy has the same idea, helping these bands. So
I actually wanted to. I moved down to Kentucky 5 years ago, and I used to work at a venue up by Chicago, and I've been to all kinds of concerts up there, knew all the radio people up there, and moved down here for a career and kind of got depressed that I wasn't with all my radio people and shit. And I called a buddy of mine. I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting my own internet station for the independent bands. He's, no, talk to Jim. Okay. So I talked to Jim, and he's like, you got the same ideas I have. Let's fucking, okay, come on.
Yeah. He called me, and he said, I want to do what you're doing. I want to do it. I'm like, let's do it. And that's what we're doing. We want to help. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've had a great life, but I want to help now. I have the possibilities of helping people. Yeah. So when you said we were, talking to you, and you were with Prophets of Addiction, and we just interviewed them, that's just fantastic. I love that shit. That we can share, with the new up and comers to help them.
Yeah. Did you already talked to Les and stuff?
We talked to Wayne.
Oh, to Wayne. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yep. I think 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I've been doing way too much lately. I had a list. I woke up this morning with a list of 20 things to do. I had 9 of them done by 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's
pretty good.
But what are you? After obviously the holidays are coming up, Christmas and everything. Are you planning to do more producing, or with with the band Last in Line, or what's going
Yeah,
on?
we actually we're doing a fourth album at the moment. So this will be the follow up to Jericho. Um,
Uh,
we have had you know, it's kind of challenging to find the time for us to work because of the nature of what everybody does, the nature of what Vivian does as well. We kind of have to work around the Def Leppard schedule, which is fine. It is what it is. Um, and So we're trying. You know, we've already got a bunch of stuff on the go, and we're going to try to get that done. The plan is that we go back out again and do some more shows after the summer of 25. Uh, and hopefully we'll be able to do maybe even go back to Europe. It would be great, and go somewhere else. Right before the pandemic, we had stuff scheduled in Japan, South America, all the European festivals, and it all vaporized, you know. And
yeah.
so, unfortunately, we didn't do that. But that's the plan. In the meantime, I've been I started writing again for myself, and so I've got a shitload of stuff now. So I'm probably looking at doing another album, another solo album, which will be fun.
Right on.
Yeah.
Now, it says you're still in. You said you're still in Las Vegas. Because one thing I never knew about until doing research on you, what is exactly Raiding the Rock Vault, and are you still with that?
No, I'm not still with it. It was great. I was involved in it for over 4 years. And it was a show that was here in Las Vegas. It was a lot of big names that were doing a show together with a video show of all these hits from between the 60s and the 80s. Um, it was spectacular. It was a very kind of high profile show. And maybe it's just typical of all Las Vegas shows. Eventually, they sort of peter out a little bit. And today, it's more about the brand. It's not so much about the people who are in it. So I sort of gracefully backed out at that point. But it was great when we first started doing it. There was, you know, Jay Shalom on drums and Blas Elias who played drums. There was um, um, Doug Aldridge would play guitar. Tracy Guns would play guitar.
Right on,
Uh,
right on.
lots of names. We had great vocalists with Robin McCauley, Paul Shortino sang. We had Mark Bowles singing. It was a great show, and it was a revolving door. So I used to rotate with Hugh McDonald, who plays
Okay.
Bon Jovi. So he and I would rotate. If he was out on the road, I would come in there, and if I was out, and vice versa. So
And it
it
and
was
it
fun.
sucks when they get so focused on the brand they lose purpose of the music.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shame. I think when that, you know, it became evident that was sort of what was most important, and then it sort of, honestly, I think it started to dwindle, maybe because of that. I mean, people were coming in because they wanted to see those names. They now I think they still have the show, but it's a lot of local people and people who are not really known outside of the of that show or anything. So, but it's good, you know. Hey, more power to them, and you know, I always wish people the best. And but I had a great time with it. It was fun for, you know, those 4 years.
Right on.
Yeah.
So let me
So,
ask you. What,
back in the beginning, you said if you didn't do this, you'd be going to medical school.
Yeah.
And and I thought about it, and I'm like, you would have probably ended up in the band Queen because everybody else there had high degrees, you know.
yes.
So,
Yeah, I talked to Brian May about that actually one time when
really,
yeah, he came to see us. What was it? It was at Donington when I played with Ozzy, and he was there backstage. I was chatting with him, and I mean, my background was physics, chemistry, biology, pure and applied mathematics. I was a complete nerd. But you know, it started when I think I had my first chemistry set when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old.
oh my
And,
That's
and I love that. You couldn't sell these chemistry sets today. You'd have
they had uranium in them, plutonium.
right, exactly. You know, you'd have the you know the international courts coming down on you. You know, with buying these really weird chemicals and stuff. But it was cool. I had a lot of fun with that, and it was just something I was really interested in. And today, I mean, I use that. Obviously, I'm in my studio, and one of my speakers blows up, and then I'm ripping it apart, and I'm pulling the circuit boards apart, and I'm
That's
changing
that's
components.
when you call the guy from Boston. He has a technical engineering degree from MIT.
Yeah.
But it was just,
I mean,
it's just funny because everybody in Queen had high degrees. They had master.
Brian May was an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
Bruce Dickinson has a PhD. I mean,
Oh, wow.
That has everything.
yeah,
I don't know.
Bruce Dickinson has everything. He flies the band's jet.
I know. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? And then,
But it's funny how that you think, all right, you know what, music's cool, but I'm gonna do this, and then like Brian May and Queen, they electrical engineering, dentistry, and all this, and then they're one of the most famous bands that have ever been around, and it's just.
But with like Brian May, it's even more than that. Like I have you ever seen his guitar?
yeah, but I mean, in what respect? Like really up close or something?
Yeah,
Like really up close. His guitar, his favorite guitar, the one that he has always had, he actually built with his father when he was like a teenager out of an old fireplace mantle.
You know, it's there was a guy who I went to school with who brought in the first electric guitar I'd ever really been able to pick up in my hands, because I used to look at them through a glass window of this music store. It was like, and then one day this guy brought a guitar in, and he had a little amplifier, and I was looking there, I was just transfixed, and he said, "Yeah, do you want to have a go?" And I played music. I played violin, played classical violin for years, but this is the first time I had an electric instrument, and I played this, just hit the strings, and there was just this sound, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's it! That's what I've been trying to tell everybody." And I wanted to hear that sound. And he'd built this guitar just the same way as you described, from some furniture worker in Camden Town who'd been sitting on a block of mahogany for 55 years, and he gracefully cut him off a slice of this mahogany and said, "Here you are, make a guitar out of that," which he did. And then I tried to build a guitar, and it was a long story because I had no idea how to. And my physics teacher, I was speaking to him, he was a kind of cool guy, and he said, "Yeah, you need a thing called a pickup." I had no idea what a pickup was, and so I was trying to sort of piecemeal this thing together, and it was it never really happened. I wasn't able to do it, but at a certain point in time, I got raised some money from everything, just got some money together and went out and bought a bass guitar. It cost me, I think, 24 pounds or 22 pounds. I just found the receipt for it. It was really funny. I just
when
found
he says pickup, he's not talking about Chevy or Dodge. He's talking about one of these.
One of those. But you know what the thing is? I actually ended up buying one of those, Chris. I went down to Macari's, which was a music store, and I spoke to this guy and I said, I want to buy a pickup, and it was very expensive. It was about three or 4 pounds, which was a lot back then. And I walked around with this thing, and it was like, I was carrying this thing. I would show it to anybody who was interested. And it was like, "Look, this is a pickup." And they're like, "What's that?" It belongs to. It's going to be on a guitar. One day there's going to be a guitar built around this thing. So,
hey, that. Hook it up to a speaker with a small power source, and it'll pick up "Pound Cake" by Van Halen. That intro was a drill over pickup.
Can I tell you something really funny? So I ended up didn't do anything, but I put this pickup underneath the violin, and I plugged it into my dad's reel-to-reel tape machine, which I kind of wired it in through inside. So I had all the guts hanging out, and I was able to sort of play notes on it. And I remember the first thing I really learned, the first bass line was the bass line for Barbara Ann by the Beach Boys. And I was playing it on the violin. And I went to see Mike Love from the Beach Boys just recently, and I was talking to him backstage. I'm friendly with his son, and I was telling him this story. He couldn't believe it. He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, it is." Like the first bass line I must have learned. I must have been, gosh, I don't know, I was 10, 11 or something, whatever.
Oh,
That's
awesome.
That is awesome. That is really cool.
Yeah.
So you've worked with everybody. You've met so many interesting people. I mean, now you're talking the Beach Boys, from the Beach Boys to Led Zeppelin, everybody. If there's any one person throughout history that you could sit down and have dinner with, who would you want to sit down and talk to?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I actually got to meet him and spend a little bit of time with him, so I don't know if that could apply. But Bowie was the person who interested me the most.
Oh, right
David
on.
Bowie.
Okay.
I think because when I first listened to him, he basically started out as a folk writer. I mean, his lyrics it was all about his lyrics, and then when he sort of went into music, there was that kind of real crossover weird thing, that the whole hunky dory era, which I loved. And then afterwards, I mean, he took that ball and ran with it to every possible style and crossover style. I mean, he was just an incredible creative um, um, musician. But it doesn't end there. I mean, I loved Elton John a lot growing up. I loved the Beatles, of course. When it got into the heavier bands, it's Led Zeppelin. It was Led Zeppelin followed by Led Zeppelin, followed by Led Zeppelin. I mean, that was everything, and it still is. I still play in the Moby Dicks, which is a 15-year running tribute band. Brian Tishy, myself, and Shaz West, and various different guitar players. And so it's.
I got to tell you, my grandmother's favorite album was Elton John's Crocodile Rock.
Oh yeah.
That's all she wanted. Every time I go, and she had one of those huge, I don't know,
The big console record players.
yeah, the big ones, and we would play. Well, we're Polish, so we would play some polkas, and she would teach me how to polka, and then as we were sitting relaxing, she wanted Elton John on, so I would put Elton John on the phonograph, and I got so addicted to that, and every song on there, it was just fantastic, and that's just one of my favorite albums. That taking away from the Motley Crue and the other albums, my mother bought me Billy Joel Glass Houses.
Oh yeah.
And that is another one of my favorites growing up, because it was something different than what I was listening to, and it showed me different styles of rock music. So
Last time we talked and you brought up Glass Houses, and I was looking it up on my phone. Later that evening, I went through my collection, and oh shit, all I had to do was open the box and pull out the fucking album. But Phil, if you're on a road trip and you can only take one album with you, what album you want to listen to?
Jeez, these are some tough questions. I got to tell you something. I'm going to break your question for a second, but a big part of my growing up and development as well was I went through an obsession with 50s and 60s Americana rock music, or rock and roll as well. So I was a huge fan of early Elvis, and all of that rock.
Chuck Berry, Big Bopper.
Yeah, almost rockabilly though, more than anything else.
Some Buddy Holly.
Some Buddy Holly, but my favorite stuff was the really kind of earthy stuff that was just not that common. Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio, that kind of stuff that was almost the punk music of that era, and it was magical to me. So, I learned a lot of stuff from Bill Black, who was Elvis's bass player, and listening to those people, and it was a great foundation. So when you say to me if I could take one album, I mean, I would almost even look at some of those early things, the Sun Session Elvis stuff. I mean, I would look at that. I would look at Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio. I love that. If it was a modern contemporary album, it would probably have to be, Hunky Dory. It would be Led Zeppelin. Just to be different, I'd probably say, Led Zeppelin 3. Just because I loved all the acoustic stuff on that. So I don't know. That was a hard one. That's a really hard one. And then I love Steely Dan as well. I mean, we were talking about that just at the top of the interview.
I like to make people think sometimes.
Yeah, make people think.
Yeah, Steely Dan would be a good one. But I mean, you and you're about 7 years older than me. So, because I'm 56.
No, I'm actually 39.
okay, so you're about 30 years younger than me.
Yeah, plus tax and a lot of months.
You only get tax in the United States. UK doesn't have
No.
tax. Yeah, but no, we grew up kind of listening to the same. So my mother and my mom and my dad listened to Motown.
Yeah.
I grew up on
Okay.
Motown a lot. But like I said, I went into the heavy metal stuff. But we grew up on a lot of the same stuff. And would you say that like Steely Dan and the early Elvis and all that stuff started the Americana rock, or is that still the Beatles coming over and maybe a few albums from the Who and um, other bands from the UK? Because really the rock didn't start. I don't want to say rock didn't start with Elvis and others, but when the Beatles came over, that's when it kind of just blew up.
Well, I think that the Beatles were influenced, and later on the Stones, or maybe around the same time, were also influenced by a lot of American blues music that was not really being accepted in America.
Yeah,
They
the
then,
Stones
they,
got their name from a Muddy Waters song.
right, and then when they came over, they presented Americans with American music in a form that was more palatable. I think that's what happened, and they'll probably agree with that as well. But so I would say that rock and roll started, for me, it started, that was it. That's why I was sort of so interested in what was happening in the late 40s and early 50s in American rock and roll music. Elvis, of course, was super famous.
Well,
And
yeah,
Well, yeah, the first person to shred on a guitar was a woman back in the 1930s named Sister Rita Maythorpe.
sister. Yep, yes, she was.
And
yeah,
she was badass on a guitar.
yeah.
Yep, yes, she was.
And
Uh,
there's a
So,
lot,
okay,
there's
bass
a lot of, oh,
was
sorry.
that?
No,
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 go
I was
ahead.
just going to add something. Did you see a movie I contributed to? It's called Rumble. It's
Yeah,
you see that movie, right? So you
yes.
see just how much of even of old blues music is actually, was contributed to by Native American influences as well. I mean, it was very, very American. It was everything that was American. So
Okay, I didn't know all that, but yeah, I do remember. I do remember the movie, but yeah, that's okay. I had no clue.
a lot of blues music, a lot of those melodies and stuff were Native American chants.
See,
Now,
I'll
now,
have to find that because I've never seen that one. But I have seen another movie you were in, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. how, how, how was that, and how was it working with the Dice Man?
Man, it was an adventure.
I bet it was.
Andrew Dice Clay's a drummer. I guess that's not a famous drummer, but that was his
Yeah,
thing.
that
And
was.
so I remember him trading licks with Randy Castillo the whole time. He'd be sitting around going, trading things on the drums, and he was funny. He was very funny. But it was really funny because I was very, very good friends, very tight friends with Sam Kennison, and there was a sort of rivalry between those two. So on the one hand, I was like, I had to kind of play both sides of the fence.
Sam Kennison was incredible. He was so awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he was. We Randy and I both met him, or he met us, or whatever it was, during a particular period that we were in LA. We were staying at the Mondrian Hotel. Randy and I, and the other person on the top floor was Randy, myself, and David Coverdale. We were all staying on the top floor of the Mondrian Hotel, and we were just going out and drinking and coming back and hanging out. And the Comedy Store was right across the street. Of course, we never go to bed, so we're like, "Oh, what we can do now? Let's go to the Comedy Store." So we go to the Comedy Store, and by that time, all the comedy acts are finished, and there's three people left and a can of soup, and there's this guy on stage yelling at his girlfriend, and we're going, "Fuck is this?" It's not. And then all of a sudden, we look at each other. This is really funny, and it was Sam. We met him, and he was. I think we might have been the first people he met in the music community, but we introduced him to everybody. We introduced him to Billy Idol, and then from there he met all these other people. It all culminated, of course, in the Wild Thing video, And then
I was just gonna say, yeah, the wilding video. Could that be made today?
no.
No.
But the thing was that Sam would also, every time he did a show in L.A. at the Hollywood Bowl, sorry, at the Universal Amphitheater, he would always have an all-star band jam afterwards, and I was always in that band, and we would do stuff together. So he was a great guy. But the going back to the movie, the Ford Fairlane movie, Vince had asked me to do it, and so we put the band together, we put Black Plague together, and we had a lot of fun doing it. It was great. I mean, those people were amazing, and of course, I met Priscilla Presley, and she was just a sweetheart. And after my history of loving all the Elvis stuff, that was a really special moment for me. Wayne Newton is probably one of the kindest and nicest gentlemen I've ever met in my entire life.
Really?
Oh, neat.
Yeah, he was fantastic. We got snowed in Denver because we shot it at Red Rocks, and we got snowed into the hotel, so we're stuck in this hotel, and we're hanging out, and there's a lady who works in the kitchen, an older lady, and she's a huge Wayne Newton fan. She came out and she said, "Can I say hi?" And he asked her, "What's your favorite song?" And she told him, and he sat her down and sang her the whole song right to her face. And she was
wow.
he was very, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard he's a pretty nice guy, Mr.
Yeah.
Las Vegas there.
Mr. Las Vegas.
Yeah, that is, yes. Yes, he is.
I'll tell you what, man. I definitely want to talk to you some more in the future, man. Because, dude, I mean, you've worked with everyone. You lived an interesting life. Every time I'm looking at the clock, thinking, yeah, we're past 20 minutes, we're past 30 minutes, we're past 40 minutes, and oh my God, I could talk to you all day, brother.
Literally, yes. I mean, you know what? I would love just to have an interview, just to pick your brain on how we can help. Just the band's up and coming.
Yeah.
What you think today's environment for music can do, and because I mean, people don't want to watch 2 hours, 3 hours of an interview. So I'd really like to get back together and just see what we could come up with to help these bands out, because I really, I really want to help these guys. I really want to help these bands coming up.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff to talk about, and there's lots of ideas to brainstorm and to throw around, and options that people have today. With the fact that people can distribute their own music, it's a blessing and a curse. You can put something out, but then you have to find some way to market it, and you have to get some way to find some way to draw people to hear your music. And if you can do that, then it can be very successful. I don't have all the answers, but I'm always open to having a chat about it and seeing what comes up.
Yeah, please, because these bands need somebody like you to just give them, just little bits of information. And like you said, we don't have all the answers, but at least we can give them some idea of which direction to go.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to be part of it.
That would be great. That would be awesome. And next time, Last in Line comes, if you guys come through the Chicago area,
yeah.
I'm going to request the rest of the Ozzy Osbourne concert that did not take place.
Did not make it. Well, we usually play at the we're usually at the Arcada in St. Charles. That's usually the place where we play a lot, isn't it?
Where's that?
The Arcada.
St. Charles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know what? Next time you're there, I'll be there.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll be following on social media.
Ozzy Osbourne, 1986. Play the show.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely be following you on social media, looking for any new albums, new tours, any of that. Let the people know real quick, where can we find you on social media on the internet?
Instagram. At Phil Soussan, and then that stuff goes through my Facebook page as well, which I don't really go to as much as I should. And that's about it. I've got a website, philsoussan.com, but nobody goes to websites anymore.
But if you go to his website, there is a section where you can hire Phil to be on your album.
Absolutely. I do sessions, and I'm always open to sessions and to mixing stuff and to working on studio stuff. I will listen to it, and I will do stuff. I usually will only do stuff if I feel like I can really bring something meaningful to it. If I feel it's not something for me, I'll tell you, you know. But
if people will send you, people can send you their music, and then you decide from there if you know
yeah,
you want.
well, I'll usually talk to them about it, yeah, and then I want to listen to it first to make sure it's something I can bring. And to that point, I've actually played on some things that I've met some great people, and I've played on some music which I think is really good, which is I'm really proud of. So it's that's the idea, that it comes out good for everybody. So
And it's and like I said earlier, it's always nice to see someone that's been in this industry as long as he has and is still making music and happy and proud of the excited about the music he's making.
absolutely.
Thank you, Phil, for sitting with us today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chronic Chris.
This is, I mean, 40
It's-
years in the making since I've seen you. So yeah.
Honestly, it's truly been an honor to sit here and talk with you today, brother.
Thank you very much.
It has.
Oh, thank
Absolutely
you.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
Thanks,
Ladies
Phil.
and gentlemen, I'm going to be off air this weekend. I am going on my yearly birthday road trip. My
Woo.
birthday's Thursday. My daughter's is Friday. So I will be back on air next Thursday for Throwback Thursday. But don't forget to tune in to Jim Monday and Tuesday evenings, Johnny Chadwick Wednesday evenings, and Stacy Miss Shockwave Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the morning. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys later.
Peace out. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, thanks for chatting with us, man.
You are
Oh,
welcome.
yeah,
Thanks for
I
having me on, Chris. And
Recording stopped.
Merry Christmas to you, and all happy holidays and happy birthday.
Yeah, same to you too, man. And like I said, I appreciate you chatting with us. I'm going to send a copy of this to Dave's email for you to do whatever you want with it, and I'll keep in touch with him, and hopefully we can chat again, man.
Sounds good. All right, take care.
Yep, you too, brother. Later.
Bye bye.